They kicked the janitor out of the store. But she was the CEO. What she did next shut everyone up. The sound of heels echoed on the white marble floor as the store opened its doors on that sunny morning in Atlanta. The bright light outside poured through the massive glass panels, reflecting in the display windows as if every bag, shoe, and dress were bathed in divine light. It was one of those luxurious boutiques where even the silence seemed rehearsed. The air was filled with the scent of imported perfumes, with notes of amber, vanilla, and something that smelled like power. The background music, a French instrumental track, played at an almost imperceptible volume, as if the store were constantly whispering, "Everything here is perfect." But that morning, something felt off. The back door opened slowly with a soft creak. Angela Dawson stepped in carrying an aluminum bucket, a few neatly folded cloths, and a bottle of disinfectant. She wore a simple navy blue uniform, with the company logo subtly embroidered on the left side of her chest. The seams were clean but slightly worn, revealing the outfit wasn't new. Her shoes were flat, black, and showed signs of wear, common for someone who walks long hallways every day unnoticed. Angela was a 36-year-old black woman with radiant dark brown skin and a steady, deep gaze. Her coily hair was tied up in a high, voluminous, well-kept bun, revealing her neck and the defined shape of her face. Her features were striking: high cheekbones, well-shaped eyebrows, full lips, and a serene expression. There was dignity even in the way she breathed. She paused for a moment near the stock area and looked around. Her eyes scanned the shelves, the fitting rooms, the mannequins, the frames on the wall. Nothing there was unfamiliar. That store was hers. But no one there had a clue. She walked discreetly to the main hall, trying not to draw attention. She pushed the bucket, extended the mop handle, and began cleaning the floor with careful movements. The sound of the cloth sliding across the marble was almost hypnotic. Every motion was deliberate. Angela looked like she was just cleaning. But inside, she was observing everything. Her eyes were trained, like someone who had spent time in many hostile environments and knew exactly where disrespect liked to hide. That's when, suddenly, the automatic door opened with a rush of cold air. A tall white woman with a snobbish posture walked in quickly. She wore a Chanel coat, oversized sunglasses, and thin high heels that looked like they had just come off the runway. In one hand, she held a red Italian leather purse with gold trim. In the other, an expensive phone, where she was furiously typing messages with perfectly manicured fingers. Her perfume was sweet and overwhelming. Without even looking at Angela, she handed over the purse with an automatic gesture, like Angela was part of the store's decor. "Hold this for me, miss," she said in a rushed, distracted tone. "And be careful, that bag cost more than your monthly paycheck." Angela held the purse gently, her fingertips slightly tense. She didn't say anything at first. Inside, she felt an old sting, the same one she used to feel years ago, when eyes would skim over her body like she was nothing more than a shadow in the way. A wound she thought had already healed, but always seemed ready to reopen. Still, she kept her gaze steady, her posture upright, and calmly replied, "Of course, ma'am. It'll be a pleasure." The woman was already walking away through the clothing racks without even saying thank you, as if Angela were invisible, as if she had no face, no name. Angela stood still for a few seconds. Her left hand held the expensive purse, her right still wrapped in the cleaning cloth. She took a deep breath, looked around. Employees hurried across the store pretending not to see her. No greetings, no direct looks, just avoidance. But that was fine. She wasn't there to be seen. She was there to see. Then she went back to cleaning. Her movements were discreet but firm. Every square foot seemed to hold a memory. She recognized the textures, the small scuffs on the floor, the corners that always gathered dirt. That store had been dreamed up by her, designed by her, funded by her. But today, in that uniform, she was just another invisible part of the scenery. And that was exactly what she wanted. That's when she heard a whisper coming from the register. "Charlotte's been unbearable this week," said one of the saleswomen while checking price tags. "They say there are going to be cuts. Bet it's going to fall on the cleaning staff again," replied the other, not realizing Angela was just a few feet away. Angela didn't react. She kept cleaning in silence. But every sentence she heard was like a piece of a puzzle she already knew all too well. Something was wrong. And if necessary, she'd spend days on her knees, pretending to be invisible, just to uncover what no one dared to say out loud. At the end of that morning, when the store began to quiet down, Angela returned to the stockroom. She opened her bag and took out a small black notebook, slightly worn at the edges. With a simple pen, she wrote on the first line of the page, "First day. Invisible, just like they expected, but more present than ever." She closed the notebook, stored it carefully, and got ready for the second shift, because that mission was just beginning. The steel door of the stockroom closed with a soft metallic click that echoed like a whisper down the silent hallway. Angela tucked the black notebook inside the inner pocket of her uniform, as if placing a secret safely close to her heart. She took a deep breath, adjusted her bun with her fingertips, and headed back to the main floor, pushing the bucket with one hand. The morning sun was already streaming through the storefront glass panels, casting golden reflections that danced across the polished white floor. The bags on the acrylic shelves gleamed so brightly they looked like they were made of gold. Everything there sparkled, except her. Angela was the only presence that didn't shine under the light, as if the entire space had been programmed to ignore her. She moved toward the main entrance and quietly knelt down, her right knee touching the cold floor with a soft, dry tap. She was next to a display of Italian shoes, almost imperceptible among the store's luxurious details. She began wiping the floor slowly, with circular, precise movements, like someone performing a silent ritual. Her breathing was controlled, her body calm. But her eyes scanned the space with surgical precision. With each square foot she cleaned, she noticed more clearly the cold stares passing through her. No employee greeted her, no customer noticed her. She was invisible, and that was exactly what she needed to be. Until the sound of heels clapping against the marble split the silence in half. Charlotte Whitmore crossed the store with arrogance sculpted into every step. She was a white woman, around 40, tall, slim, extremely pale, with sharp features and flawless makeup. Her light eyes were like blocks of ice, beautiful but incapable of warmth. She wore a tight beige dress that hugged her slender figure and a white tailored blazer. The strong, expensive perfume she wore left a trail of superiority in the air. She stopped abruptly in front of Angela, like someone slamming the brakes in front of something unacceptable. "What is this?" she snapped, her sharp voice loud enough to be heard at the back of the store. "You're scrubbing the floor now, right at the entrance?" Angela didn't rush to respond. She stayed kneeling, finishing the motion of the cloth with precision before lifting her head. Her deep, calm eyes met Charlotte's without haste. "Yes, ma'am. The manager asked me to start here," she answered firmly, not with defiance, but without submission. Charlotte looked around theatrically, as if performing for an invisible audience. Two customers, a woman and an older man, watched from a distance, uncomfortable, but quickly looked away. After all, in that place, no one got involved. Luxury, for many, meant silence in the face of injustice. "This is a luxury store, not a public laundromat," Charlotte said, waving her hand with disdain. Do you want our clients to slip and break their heels? Or are you waiting for someone to trip over your bucket too? Angela stood up, holding the damp cloth in one hand. She looked at the floor, then at the bucket, and finally at Charlotte. Her expression was neutral, but there was a quiet tension, like a stretched rubber band. "I can finish faster, if that's the case," she said calmly. Charlotte crossed her arms and tilted her chin slightly upward. Her tone now was more cruel, more personal. "No, here's what you're going to do. Take that bucket, go to the back of the store, and scrub the bathrooms, because that's all you're good for, got it?" The entire store froze. A cold silence fell over the sales floor like a heavy blanket. Everyone heard. Everyone understood. But no one reacted. Angela lowered her eyes, not out of submission, but by choice. Her eyes burned, not with tears, but with the kind of old fire only those who've been belittled too many times learn to tame. A silent fire. Dense. Warm. Charlotte turned on her heels and walked off with the upright posture of someone who believes they've won a battle. Her blonde hair swayed with elegance, and her perfume left a final sentence in the air. Power is not up for discussion. But in the corner of the store, behind a rack of floral dresses, Imani Rhodes had witnessed everything. She was a young, light-skinned black woman, around 27 years old, slender, with shoulder-length straight hair and green eyes that were now wide open. She wore the store's formal uniform with the posture of someone who dreams of growing, but in that moment, reality seemed to crush her. She was holding a stack of clothes in her arms, but couldn't move. Imani's heart was pounding. That scene, that voice, that humiliation. It all reminded her of the times her own mother was treated with disdain for cleaning other people's houses, always silent, always with a restrained smile. And now, right before her eyes, that old pain was coming back to life. Angela picked up the bucket. Her steps were slow but firm. She walked past customers and employees as if no one were there. But inside, something was already decided. And as she walked down the hallway toward the back, a phrase formed in her mind like a sharp blade. "If they think I'm small, it's because they haven't looked up yet." She gave a slight smile. Subtle, closed. One of those smiles that doesn't ask for attention but announces a storm. What would come next would shut everyone up. Imani hesitated for a few seconds before moving. Still holding the stack of dresses, she stopped in the middle of the hallway and looked around. Her breathing was more labored, as if something was pressing against her chest from the inside. The muffled sound of background music and the faint noise of hangers being moved now felt distant, as if the world had turned down the volume. The smell of cleaning still hung in the air, a subtle mix of citrus disinfectant and the sweet floral perfume of Charlotte, who had passed through moments earlier like a hurricane of arrogance and coldness. Imani took 2 hesitant steps, clutching the clothes against her body as if seeking a shield. She reached the narrow hallway that led to the staff locker room and saw the cleaning supply room door slightly ajar, the fluorescent light reflecting off a stainless steel sink. Angela was inside. With her back turned, standing, she was organizing damp cloths on the metal counter with slow, careful movements. It was as if every fold had a purpose. Her posture was upright, calm, as if nothing had happened, or as if she had already been through much worse. Imani stood there watching for a moment. She didn't know if she should go in. She didn't know if she could. But something inside her insisted. Go. Talk to her. Ask. Apologize. She took a deep breath, gathered her courage, and gently pushed the door. "Hi. Sorry to bother you," she said, in a near whisper, her eyes shy. Angela slowly turned her face. Her brown eyes, deep like ancient wells, met Imani's. And in that moment, the young woman felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't fear. It was a strange sensation, like that woman could see beyond. That look wasn't from a regular employee. It was the look of someone who had fought battles no one there could imagine. "You're not bothering me," Angela replied with a serene voice. "At least back here, no one's yelling." Imani let out a short, almost soundless laugh and looked at the floor. The silence that followed was awkward, but also filled with something she couldn't name. Until, unable to hold it back, she let the words out. "You shouldn't have to hear those things. The way she spoke to you, it was cruel. Nobody deserves that." Angela picked up a dry cloth and began folding it precisely. Each fold seemed to carry a crumpled emotion, an untold story. Her hands were steady but gentle, as if folding the cloth was also a way to keep her world in order. "This isn't new to me," she replied, with a half-smile full of old memories. "The difference is, today I hear it and let it go, because I know who I am." Imani swallowed hard. That phrase hit deep. It was simple, but said so much. She lowered her eyes, feeling the guilt of the words she hadn't said. "Even so, it's wrong, and I should have said something. I felt it in my chest, you know? Something hot, this urge to scream. But I stayed silent, and that made me feel like her." Angela stopped what she was doing. She placed the cloth on the counter and looked at Imani more gently, like someone seeing the reflection of her own story in another woman's eyes. "You're not like her," she said with firmness and kindness at the same time. "You're just trying to survive in a system built to silence you, and that isn't weakness. It's resistance. But don't worry. Things change. Sooner or later, they always do." Imani slowly nodded. Those words entered like medicine, bitter but necessary. "You talk differently," she said, now with teary eyes. "You remind me of my mom. She used to clean floors too. But she had this way of talking, of walking, of existing, that made everyone around her feel small, like she was the only giant in the room." Angela smiled, this time for real, a smile that mixed pain, pride, and tenderness. "She doesn't know who I am," she said, referring to Charlotte. "But she's going to find out why I'm here." Imani remained silent. The air temperature seemed to change. That woman, in that simple uniform, with that cloth in her hands and eyes full of stories, wasn't just a janitor. You're not just a janitor, are you?" Imani asked, more certain than questioning. Angela didn't answer. She simply picked up another cloth, folded it with the same calm, and went back to organizing them in perfect rows. But her eyes said it all. And in that moment, Imani knew. A revolution was about to begin, and she wanted to be on the right side when it happened. In the hallway that led to the administrative office, Imani walked more slowly than usual. She could still feel the weight of what had just happened in the supply room with Angela. That woman had stirred something deep inside her. But now wasn't the time to get emotional, not in that environment. She took a deep breath and entered the stock control room, a narrow space with an old computer and piles of forms in coloured folders. A faint smell of reheated coffee filled the air. Sitting at the desk, with his blazer hanging on the back of the chair and his shirt sleeves rolled up, was Matthew Blake. He was a 30-year-old white man with light brown hair combed to the side, greyish-blue eyes that always seemed to be in analysis mode, and a neatly trimmed beard. He had that discreet elegance of someone who prefers listening before speaking. He was focused on a spreadsheet open on the laptop. The numbers blinked coldly on the screen, but what caught his attention was Imani standing at the door, her eyes slightly puffy. "You okay?" he asked, looking away from the monitor. Imani hesitated. She didn't expect empathy there, especially not from him. "Just tired," she replied, trying to smile. Matthew got up, walked over to the side counter, and grabbed 2 small cups of coffee. "Want to talk? Or just escape the chaos?" he said, handing her one. She accepted, raising an eyebrow slightly. That was unexpected. "Maybe both," she said, sitting in the chair across from his. Matthew returned to the laptop, but didn't immediately go back to the data. He just glanced at Imani from the corner of his eye, as if picking up on what wasn't being said. "I saw you're at the top of the sales goals this month," he commented casually. "Actually, you've been at the top since February." Imani looked at him, surprised. You're tracking that?" "Yes," he replied. "I'm on the IT team, but today I'm reviewing the store's metrics, and your numbers are impressive." She looked down, smiled ironically. "Impressive on paper only. Nothing ever changes in my paycheck." Matthew frowned. "What do you mean?" "No bonuses, no recognition, no promotion. And if you ask why, there's always a new excuse." She paused. "But deep down, we know the reason." He understood. Silence. Imani's still wet eyes met his, but this time there was more than pain. There was bottled frustration, a hunger for justice. Matthew inhaled slowly. "I can take a deeper look into that for you, if you'd like," he said. "Maybe more people are being affected." Imani stared at him for a while. She wasn't used to that kind of kindness, especially from a white man in a position of power. But in that moment, she didn't see arrogance. She saw humanity. "Why would you do that?" she asked. Matthew answered without looking away. "Because I hate when they dim the ones who shine." She hadn't expected that. And in that moment, she smiled for the first time in days. Not a showroom smile, but one that escaped without permission. Outside, the store kept up its routine of appearances. But inside, between spreadsheets and truths, something had begun to take shape. A silent connection between 2 worlds that, until recently, had seemed impossible to touch. And deep down, without either of them saying it out loud, they knew that conversation wasn't over. Matthew stayed silent for a few more seconds, eyes fixed on the laptop screen. The team performance spreadsheets were right there, cold, neatly organized into columns of goals, prizes, bonuses. But one discrepancy stood out, clear as day. He started typing again, now with more precision, cross-referencing data, dates, profiles. He compared names, job titles, and rewards distributed over the last 12 months. The deeper he went, the more a knot tightened in his chest. Imani remained seated across the table, watching. The smile that had once lit up the room was gone. Her face was serious, but there was a firmness in her jaw, a resistance sharpened by time. Matthew broke the silence, his voice laced with disbelief. "You hit incredible targets, every single month, but the bonuses, they never came." Imani looked away. There was shame in her eyes, but not for anything she had done. "No," she said, voice muffled. "They never came." Matthew looked at her again, trying to stay neutral, but his face could no longer hide the anger. "That doesn't make sense. The numbers are right here, clear. Other salespeople with fewer results got awards, bonuses, promotions." Imani took a deep breath. It wasn't easy to say out loud what she knew, but now she saw no reason to hold it back. "You want to know why?" she asked. Matthew nodded slowly. Imani looked him straight in the eyes, steady. "Around here," shining too much is a problem if it comes from the wrong skin." The words dropped like a stone. There was no ignoring them, no softening them. Matthew lowered his eyes. This wasn't just a clerical error. It was a silent, rooted, corrupted system. He closed the laptop, crossed his arms, and leaned back in his chair. "And no one's ever reported this?" he asked. Imani let out a short, humorless laugh. "Who would believe us? We're trained to be grateful just to have a job, even when that job erases us." Matthew nodded thoughtfully. Then he stood up and took 2 steps across the room, ran a hand down his face, restless. This stirred something in him more deeply than he expected. Finally, he turned back to her with a new look in his eyes. Determined. "Do you trust me?" he asked. Imani hesitated. Trust was a risk, always had been, but there was something about that man, something that didn't demand, but offered real support. "I want to trust," she said. "Then let me show you everything," Matthew said. "If it's happening to you, it's happening to others too. And if it's true, this store is going to have to answer for every hidden comma." Imani tightened her grip on the coffee cup. Her heart was racing. For a moment, she didn't just see a man in front of her. She saw a chance. "Are you sure you want to dig into this?" she asked. Matthew looked her in the eye. "I am." Because when the truth makes people uncomfortable, it's hitting the right spot. And so, without anyone in the store knowing, an unlikely alliance was born. A tech auditor and a silenced saleswoman. A rigged system on the verge of being exposed. And at the center of it all, a truth that would change everything. Outside the room, Angela passed by with her cleaning cart. She caught only the end of the conversation, her quiet gaze fixed on the door. And in that instant, she knew. The game had just changed. The store was full that afternoon. Customers walked through the well-lit aisles, touching expensive items and praising the store's modern design. The ambient soundtrack was soft, elegant, nearly inaudible, as if silence was part of the shopping experience. But behind that luxury facade, tension was growing like a rope about to snap. Angela pushed her cleaning cart through the women's section of the store. Her shoulders were straight, her expression steady, but her eyes were sharp. She knew Charlotte was watching her. Since day one, the manager seemed to be waiting for a reason. And that afternoon, she'd get one. While trying to move around a display of long dresses, the cloth Angela was carrying slipped from her hand, and instinctively, she bent down to pick it up. In that quick motion, her arm brushed the base of a mannequin placed too close to the entrance. The sound of the impact was sharp. The mannequin toppled sideways and hit the floor, taking with it a genuine leather handbag that had been on display. Silence rippled through the store like a wave. Charlotte spun on her heels with shocking speed. She emerged from among the customers with a look of barely contained fury. It was as if she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Of course," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "You just couldn't leave without destroying something, could you?" Still kneeling, Angela reached out to gather the mannequin pieces. A shard of acrylic sliced the palm of her left hand. Blood trickled slowly, but she didn't stop. She didn't complain. She just kept going, using a cloth to press against the cut. Charlotte stepped closer, now shouting. "Aren't you ashamed? Look at this mess. That window display cost more than your entire salary." Some customers discreetly stepped back. Others pretended not to hear. The employees froze. Imani, who had just come from the stockroom with a clipboard in hand, saw it all. Her chest tightened. Her eyes burned. She wanted to scream, wanted to rush over, but she stayed still. One part of her was afraid, the other, furious. Charlotte pointed directly at Angela as if accusing her of a crime. Grab your things and get out of my store. You are permanently banned from coming back here. Do you understand?" Angela didn't answer. She didn't lift her head. She kept picking up the pieces, folding the pain in her hands like someone turning a wound into a vow. Across the floor, Imani couldn't hold back anymore. The tears started falling, silent, while she bit her lip to contain the rage. It was like watching her own mother being humiliated all over again, as if every one of Charlotte's words cut through generations. Angela finished gathering the pieces, her knees red, her hands blood-streaked. She slowly stood, picked up her bucket, and without saying a single word, walked toward the back door. Her silence was louder than any scream. Charlotte scoffed, spun on her heels, and stormed off toward the back of the store like someone who had won a war. But no one realized that that public humiliation had just opened a new chapter. And in Imani's tear-filled eyes, something dangerous was being born. Courage. 2 days had passed since the public humiliation. The store carried on with its routine, as if nothing had happened. The display was already rearranged, the mannequin replaced, and Charlotte seemed more self-important than ever. She walked with her nose in the air, as if she had cleared the store of a threat. Employees spoke in hushed tones, careful not to attract attention. The atmosphere was tenser, drier. Imani, however, was different. She carried a restlessness in her chest. Her eyes saw everything more clearly. Something inside her had awakened, something that would no longer allow that kind of injustice to be swallowed and forgotten. And then, at exactly 2:02 p.m., the store's automatic doors opened. The sound of heels clicking against the pristine floor stopped everything. Salespeople froze. Customers looked away, as if sensing something important was about to happen. Angela Dawson walked in with steady steps. She wore a tailored white blazer, fitted dress pants, nude heels, and a necklace of discreet pearls. Her natural hair was out, a powerful, voluminous afro, and her eyes, now lined with makeup, were sharper than ever. Behind her, 2 security guards in black suits walked silently, discreet, but clearly alert. Angela stopped in the center of the store, looked around calmly, and announced with a firm, cutting voice, "Good afternoon. I came to check how the service is going in my store." Silence fell instantly. Charlotte came out from the fitting room area with an automatic smile on her face, but it disappeared the moment her eyes met Angela's. The blood drained from the manager's face. She went pale as wax. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Imani, who had been folding T-shirts by the register, dropped one to the floor. Her eyes widened, and she instinctively covered her mouth with her hand. It was her, the janitor, the humiliated woman. She hadn't just returned. She had returned as the CEO of the company. Angela walked slowly through the store, observing everything, every detail, every employee. She stopped in front of the mannequin that had fallen 2 days earlier. "I see the window display was replaced," she said, raising an eyebrow slightly. "I trust the reason was properly logged in the system." Charlotte tried to regain control. "Dr. Dawson, I didn't know you were coming today. Angela stopped her with a look. "You're right. You didn't know." She turned to face her. "But I knew what I would find." Charlotte took a step back. The other employees looked at each other, tense and confused. Some were already starting to understand what was happening. Others simply watched in silence. Angela then pulled a tablet from her pocket and handed it to one of the security guards, who cast the store's internal security footage onto the main TV. There, in front of everyone, the recording of the humiliation began to play. Charlotte yelling. Angela on her knees, picking up broken pieces. The cruel words, the blood, the silence, everything. Imani brought a hand to her chest, overcome with emotion. Her body trembled, and her eyes filled with tears. Angela said nothing. She just watched. When the video ended, the entire store remained in absolute silence. This moment was no longer about one employee. It was about dignity, about respect, about everything that gets ignored when someone wears a uniform. Angela looked at Charlotte one last time. "I came here as a janitor, to see what doesn't show up in reports." Her voice was calm but sharp. "And now, everyone's going to see what happens when you step on the people carrying this company on their backs." The silence was complete, and in the air, there was a certainty. Nothing would ever be the same again. Charlotte was still frozen in front of the screen when Angela spoke again. The store was still completely silent. It was as if the air had gotten heavier, as if everyone knew that this moment would never be forgotten. Angela took the tablet again, slid her fingers, and opened another folder. "Now, let's talk numbers," she said, voice steady. "Because words can be denied, but data doesn't lie." On the screen, a new sequence of information appeared. Graphs, spreadsheets, the store's internal reports. Imani, still standing near the counter, covered her mouth with her hand when she saw her own name on the screen, followed by dozens of sales goals achieved, and 0 bonuses. Angela turned to everyone. In the last 12 months, the store reported sales growth in 18 of the 20 audited weeks, but the bonus reports were falsified to prevent certain employees from receiving what they earned. She paused and looked directly at Charlotte. They all had one thing in common: the color of their skin. Charlotte tried to interrupt. I didn't authorize any of this. These reports came straight from corporate. It might be a system error. Angela raised her hand with grace, silencing her without raising her voice. "You don't need to defend yourself now. I gave you that chance, back when there was still some dignity left to save." Charlotte began to unravel. Her once imposing posture now melted into nervous gestures, trembling hands, stumbling words. "You can't do this to me. I gave years to your company. This isn't fair." Angela walked slowly toward her. She looked into the eyes of the woman who had humiliated her days before, not knowing who she was stepping on. "You didn't do this to me, Charlotte," she said in a low voice. "You did it to all of us, to every woman you silenced, to every janitor you made cry in the restroom, to every young black woman you ignored." Charlotte, now completely shaken, lost control. "You just want to ruin my life." Angela stood firm. "I want you to feel, even if just a little, what it's like to be invisible. Just a little. And maybe out there without the name tag, you'll learn what you never learned in here: respect." One of the security guards handed Angela a folder. She pulled out a document and signed it right there on the counter. Then she extended the copy to Charlotte, who didn't have the courage to touch the paper. "Termination for just cause, and a formal complaint to the company's legal department," she declared. Charlotte, pale, grabbed her bag with trembling hands. She walked toward the exit under everyone's gaze. Not a single employee defended her. No customer questioned it. Silence was her only companion. Minutes later, videos of the scene began circulating on social media. Someone had discreetly recorded everything. Within hours, Angela Dawson's name was trending nationwide. CEO goes undercover as janitor and exposes racist manager. The headlines exploded. TV shows, news portals, influencers, everyone was talking about it. What was meant to be an internal investigation had turned into a national movement. But there in the store, Angela looked at Imani, who was crying quietly, unsure if it was from relief, rage, or admiration. and with a slight nod, the CEO told her everything without saying a word. It was done. And it was only the beginning. The next day, the store reopened under a new atmosphere. The lights seemed softer, the mood less tense, and the looks, once fearful, now carried a mix of respect and anticipation. It felt like the space was finally breathing something different, truth. Angela walked in without security this time. She wore a dark blue tailored jumpsuit with a modest neckline, flat shoes, and her hair pulled back into a perfect bun. Her walk was calm, but her gaze remained focused. All the employees gathered in the center of the store. Rumors had already been spreading behind the scenes. Something important was about to happen. Angela stepped onto a small platform next to the customer service counter and looked at each one of them. "These past few days have taught us a lot," she began, her voice steady but warm. "Mostly about who we are, when we think no one's watching." Some employees lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others listened closely, with admiration. Angela then extended her hand to Imani, who was standing beside the purse display, surprised and unsure what to do. "Imani Rhodes," she said with a gentle smile, "you showed more than competence. You showed courage, integrity, and compassion, even when it could have cost you your job. And for that, starting today, you are officially the new manager of this store." The room filled with murmurs and spontaneous applause. Imani brought a hand to her chest, stunned. She walked toward Angela with teary eyes and trembling legs. Her uniform suddenly felt small compared to the responsibility she was about to carry. I don't know what to say," she stammered, her voice shaky. Angela took her hands firmly and replied, "Just say what you feel. The rest, you'll learn along the way." Imani nodded with a shaky smile, tears slipping quietly down her face. Matthew, standing by the display wall, walked over. He wore a light shirt and dark jeans. His eyes couldn't hide the pride. He reached out, but instead of just shaking her hand, he interlaced his fingers with hers and whispered, "You're not invisible. Not ever again." Imani looked at him like the world had paused for a moment, and in that moment, between glances that spoke louder than 1,000 words, she leaned in and softly pressed her lips to his. A discreet, quick kiss, but full of truth. There, in front of everyone, without needing to explain anything, two hearts met. Not by luck, but by struggle. Angela watched the scene with a quiet, gentle smile. She knew. She knew that love born from pain grows deeper roots, and that justice, when wrapped in tenderness, heals old wounds. The entire store applauded, but in that moment, the applause wasn't for Angela. It wasn't for Imani. It was for something bigger, for dignity restored. Weeks later, Angela stepped onto the stage at the Atlanta Convention Center in front of a packed audience. The event was the Inclusive Leadership Summit, and she had been invited as the keynote speaker. The hall was full of entrepreneurs, businesswomen, college students, and fashion industry professionals. But there was something different about this crowd. They didn't see her only as a successful CEO. She was now a symbol, a voice, a leader. Behind her, a screen displayed white letters on a black background. "Dignity is the real luxury." Angela wore an elegant white suit with subtle gold accents at the cuffs. Her hair was loose and voluminous, and her eyes shone brighter than ever. But it wasn't the shine of fame. It was the shine of someone who had survived and won with integrity. She walked to the center of the stage with firm steps as quiet camera flashes captured every moment. The audience's breath seemed suspended. "Not long ago," she began with a clear voice, "I walked into one of my own stores wearing a janitor's uniform. and I was treated like I didn't even exist." The crowd murmured quietly, some already wiping their eyes. "I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just observed, because I needed to see what no one else had the courage to tell me." She paused briefly, looked toward the front row. Imani was there, her manager's badge on her chest, with Matthew at her side, holding her hand. She smiled, her eyes full of tears. Angela continued, "On that day, I was called incompetent. I was kicked out of my own store, humiliated. And even so, I stayed silent, but not out of weakness, out of strategy. Because sometimes, silence is the safest bridge between pain and justice." The audience was completely captivated. She took a deep breath and then, with a voice choked by restrained emotion, said, "Never underestimate the one who cleans the floor. She might be the one who built the roof." The impact of the phrase was immediate, a second of absolute silence, and then the entire hall rose in applause. It wasn't polite applause, it was emotional, standing, long, honest. Social media exploded. Videos of the speech spread like wildfire. News channels replayed her words. Comments multiplied in real time. "This woman spoke for all of us. I cried at work today watching this story. Thank you, Angela. Finally, someone with the courage to show what happens behind the curtain." In the following days, the hashtag #SheBuiltTheRoof reached millions of shares. Companies began reviewing their internal protocols. Leadership programs started forming based on her story, and young black girls across the country used their platforms to say, "I can too." But Angela wasn't seeking fame. She was seeking change. And that night, when she got home and quietly took off her shoes in the living room, she looked at the black-covered notebook on the table. The same one where she had written on the first day. Invisible as expected, but more present than ever. She picked up the pen, wrote the final line. "Today, the world saw me." And for the first time in a long time, she cried. Not from pain, but from relief. Because her story was no longer just hers. Now it belonged to everyone. And now, tell me, what did you think of this story? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments. I really want to know how much it moved you. If you liked it, give the video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow the next stories. And before you go, I've picked out another emotional story that's going to touch your heart even more. It's on the screen now. Click there and I'll see you in the next chapter.